Okay, good morning. Today, for pre-calculus, I'm going to be looking at linear and nonlinear systems of equations. So you should remember these from, we teach it to you in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, but this is a basic linear system, which means, I want to have either the x or the y's cancel out. So if, for example, I took this top equation and I multiplied it by -5, I'd get -5x and +5x, and they would cancel out. Remember, you got to multiply everything by 5x, including the 0. All right, so I get this. I'm just going to rewrite the other equation right below it. And then you add straight down, those cancel. That gives me 2y equals 6, and there y equals 3. And then you take it and you plug it into the easier of the two equations, which gives me x minus 3 equals 0, and from the top equation there. So x equals 3. So 3 is my answer, okay? And you can plug it in, check it into both equations, make sure it works. But that's the basics of it, okay? Now we're going to start with that, and we're going to work our way up. So it's not all going to be linear ones. So the next one, you can see it's similar, except that the bottom equation is not linear. All right. Now I still need either the x's or the y's to cancel out, which means the y's are going to be much easier because I'm not going to be able to get rid of that x squared and the x without doing some fancy stuff, which I'm not really wanting to do. However, you'll notice if I just add straight down, my y's cancel out. So that's what I want to do. I don't have to multiply, but you might, in other situations, you might have to multiply one of the equations to get the y's to cancel. But when I do it this way, you'll see I get x squared, -2x plus 3x is +1x. The y's are gone, equals 6. Now, this is, not a bad equation to work with. I can subtract 6 from both sides. So I get equals 0. I got x squared plus x minus 6 equals 0. Now I can factor and solve it. Things that multiply to -6 and add up to +1, the 1 in the middle, would be 3 and 2. Let's see, if I make the 3 positive and the 2 negative, it multiplies to -6 and adds up to 1. And then you go x plus 3 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0, and I get my two x answers. I have to figure out the y's. Okay, so you're going to take the easier of the two equations here, right? Don't kill yourself with the x squared equation. I'm going to take the -2x plus y equals 5, that one, all right? The linear, -2x plus y equals 5. Okay, I'm going to plug in the -3 into both of them, okay? And I'm going to plug in the 2, and I'll get my y coordinates. All right, so -2 times -3 is -6, +6 rather. 6 plus what is 5? That would be y is -1, which means my coordinates are -3, 1. Over here, I plug in the 2. So that's -4 plus y equals 5. And if I add 4 to both sides, I get y equals 9. So 2, 9. So these are my two answers, okay? And that's how we're going to do these. So if you got questions on that, please bring it to class. Number 3. This one, a little bit trickier because I got both squareds in the bottoms, in the bottom equation. When you have this kind of setup, we're going to do it by substitution instead of by elimination, okay? So if I take this top equation and we'll isolate either the x or the y, I'm just going to subtract x from both sides and I get that, okay? Which means I can take this equation now and where the y was, I'm going to plug in the 1 minus x. Okay, and now I've got one equation, one variable. Okay, now it's going to take a little bit of work to simplify this, but let's start chipping away at it and see how this goes. The first thing I'm going to do is square that. Okay, if I square that out, a perfect square is 1 squared plus x squared. The middle term will be what you get when you multiply these two together and double it, or you could do FOIL or box, but that's negative x times 2 is negative 2x. Okay, and now if I multiply that by 3, we can do the distributive property. So that's 3 minus 6x plus 3x squared. And I have this other x squared in the front here. So let's see, if I pull this all together now, 3x squared and 1x squared is 4x squared minus 6x plus 3 equals 0. Oops, equals 21. And then I subtract the 21 from both sides, I get minus 18. Now that's something I can factor, okay? Either factor and solve it, I pull out a 2, and I got 2x cubed minus 3x minus 9 equals 0. You factor and solve that. I go a times c, which is negative 18. Things that multiply at negative 18 add up to negative 3 would be negative 6 and 3. And I got the 2x cubed. Draw a line down the middle, factor by grouping. You guys should all be experts at this by this point in the class. Pull out a 2x, I'm left with x. It should be a squared. X minus 3. Over here I can pull out a 3, and I get x minus 3. Which means I got 2x plus 3 times x minus 3 equals 0. That 2 in the front here, I can just divide it into the 0, believe it or not, and it becomes irrelevant. So I got 2x plus 3 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0, and if I solve these two things, I get x equals negative 3/2 and x equals 3. Now, once again, I got to find the y coordinate, so I'm going to take the easy equation and plug those in, okay? The x plus y equals 1. And if I plug in negative 3/2 for x, I'll get my y coordinate of 5/2. Over here, if I plug in 3 for x, I get y equals negative 2. So there's my coordinates. I got negative 3/2, 5/2. And over here for the x, I got 3, negative 2. And those are my answers. Okay? So that's how you do that one for substitution. Next one, number 4. Number 4 is a little different because we got two things that equal y. All right, so this one's not so bad to set up. Just set both of these things equal to each other, okay? And I get an equation I can work with. So this equals x to the 4th minus 2x plus 1. If the two things are equal to the same thing, then they're equal to each other. And now I'm going to bring everything to one side and see how this goes. So I'm going to add x squared. I'm going to subtract 1. And what I get is I got x to the 4th plus x squared minus, I had a typo on this. That was x squared. I didn't write the x squared here. That's why this isn't working out. This should be minus x squared. And yeah, that the ones cancel. So it's just that equals 0, right? Because these are gone, the others add up. All right, great. So this one will be interesting. So I could pull an x squared out of both of those, right? Which leaves me with x squared minus 1, okay? So I'm going to have several answers here. I got x squared equals 0, and I got x squared minus 1 equals 0. So when I solve these, I get x equals plus or minus 0, which is just x equals 0, right? This one, I get x squared equals 1, so x squared, or x equals plus or minus 1. That one you gotta have two answers, so I got x equals 1, x equals -1, and x equals 0. And remember, I got to take one of these original equations and plug that back in. So I'm going to choose the easier of the two equations, which is the y equals negative x squared plus 1. And I will get my I'm going to have three answers for this one because I'll show you a graph of this in a minute, but it's got three intersections, in other words. So this one, y equals 1, because that's where x equals 0. This one, y will equal -1 plus 1, which is 0. This one, if I plug in -1, square it, it becomes +1, then it becomes negative. That one's also 0. So here are my three pairs of coordinates: 0, 1, 1, 0, -1, 0. So if I was to go graph this, the reason why you get three different answers is because it looks kind of crazy, but this graph, it's got a parabola, and then it's got this other one that has and then it's there, and then it goes. It would be something like this. So it's got 1, 2, 3 points of intersection, and that's why you get three answers. Okay, that one's definitely a weird one. All right, next one, number 5. Let's see, with this one, this is pretty good for getting the x's to cancel out, right? If I just multiply that top thing by -1, I will get x and -x. So I got -x plus y equals -3 when I multiply that out. X minus y squared equals 1. So we'll see how this one goes. Next, I'm going to cancel out those x's. I like to put my y squareds first. Plus y equals -3 plus 1 is -2. Now if I bring everything to one side, I like the y squareds to be positive. So I brought everything to the right instead of the left. And now I can factor and solve, right? What multiplies to -2 and adds up to -1? Well, that's y minus 2, y plus 1. This one's going nice and easy. So I get y minus 2 equals 0, y plus 1 equals 0, and I get y equals 2, y equals -1. And when I plug those back into the easier of the two equations, which is presumably the top one, x minus y equals 3. I will get my other answers. So x minus 2 equals 3, so that's x will be 5. Over here, if I go x minus -1 equals 3, that's same as x plus 1 equals 3, then x equals 2. So I get my two answers here. I got 2, -1, and over here I got 5, 2. Remember, the x always goes first because they're coordinates. So it's like graphing. All right, there's number 5. Rolling right along. Next one. I'm just going to roll through two of these quick problems. All right, there's little tricks to these things that'll make life easier. With this one, fractions can be tricky. I mean, you can work with them. It'll work. But, you know, if I saw this, I would like to go, geez, I'm going to get rid of that 6. So if the 6 in the denominator means if I multiply everything by 6, then I'll get rid of that denominator. So I get -6x minus 5x. Sorry, that should be a pretty sure I got a typo here. Let me fix this. It should have been a y, that 5/6 y, not an x. I had a typo in my work. Okay, so equals 6 times 7 is 42, and it's going to be negative 42 because the 7 is negative. So now let me write the other equation right on top here. And you will see an interesting thing happens because both variables cancel out. So remember, when that happens, this is boom, boom, 0 equals negative 45. It's either all real answers, infinite solutions, or no solution. If the two things are equal to each other, it's infinitely many solutions. This one is no solution because 0 does not equal negative 45. You could also put the null set, the 0 with a slash through it. Okay, but that's the answer for that one. So that was that. Next one, and I believe it's my last one too. All right, so this one. Once again, tricks to do. I like, you can get rid of the decimals pretty easy here. If you just multiply everything by 10, in fact, if I multiply this one by 10 also, it could be easier, then I get 1.5x plus 8y equals 23. Sorry, multiply by 10, get rid of the 15x. That was the whole reason for doing that. So that's the top equation. Bottom equation, if I multiply that one by 10, I get 3x minus 2y equals 1. Okay, so if I do that, then life is usually easier with whole numbers anyways. And if I multiply the bottom equation by, let's see, negative 5 will give me, the x's will cancel. I could also multiply by to get the y's to cancel, I can multiply by 4. I think I'll do that one just for, so I got a 12x minus 8y equals 4 times 1 is 4. And then I'm just going to rewrite the other equation right on top. And now I add straight down, the y's cancel. And I got 27x equals 27, so x equals 1. And now I'm going to pick one of those equations. You could pick any of them really. Plug it back in. I'll take the 3 times x minus 2y equals 1 equation and plug it in. And I get 3 minus 2y equals 1. Subtract 3 from both sides. And I'll get y equals 1. So 1, 1 is my answer there. Okay. And so that concludes the lesson for today. That's all I got. If you have any questions, please bring them into class. And with that, I will end. Have a great night.